Hungani, thank you for joining Collective Action Magazine on this episode where we're talking about male and trauma due to domestic violence and abuse. This is something that has riddled our nation, and there's so much silence and throttling around it. We have brought you here in this episode to help us unpack this because you have gone through this yourself, and you've openly spoken about your experience and the impact it's had on your life. And you're now a member of Matrix Men, you correct me there, a member of Matrix Men, and you're representing a lot of men in this space. You also shed some light on us in terms of what's actually really going on the ground. But before we start the interview, I just want to share a little quote from the Center of Justice, Peace and Human Rights. They wrote an article on male domestic violence in South Africa and Nigeria. They say that anxiety, depression, fear, post-trauma stress disorder are some of the impacts of male gender violence. We've seen a high increase in male suicide in South Africa. 2019 was ranked as the second highest male suicide in the world. And from the stats that are coming out, it's not getting any better. And these are some of the issues that are going on in the background. Today, we want to unpack this and let's have a fun conversation around this, but also sensitizing our audience in terms of the impact this is having in our society. So before we start, we want to know a bit more about you, who's Hungani. I know you as Romeo, and I know a lot of fans know you as Romeo, but who is Hungani Ndhlovu?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege, and I don't take this opportunity lightly. Hungani is a young Black man who is now a father, my husband, a child of God, believe in the Christian faith. And that is essentially who I am. What I do is not who I am, but I do work as an actor, dancer, DJ, entertainer, pretty much. And yeah, the entertainment industry is where I find myself. But yeah, I'm just a young man living in a male body experience.
You seem to be in the artsy field a lot. Is that your calling, area of calling?
I think it's definitely more of a, this thing of like calling. I think sometimes we exaggerate the things that we enjoy doing into callings just so that we can find meaning and purpose to it. For me, it's something that I enjoy doing because I grew up not being able to express myself. So I didn't feel like I had a voice, but yet I was a dancer. So dancing was my form of expression, and I found my voice through being in the entertainment space. Hence, I grew more in the entertainment space because I felt like my voice was growing through me, going from dancer to actor, to content creator, to DJ, to MC. Like as my versatility grew within the entertainment industry, I felt my own voice as Hungani was becoming a stronger voice. Hence, I'm even able to go on platforms like this and sharing my voice. I think it's just one of those things that I realized helped me develop a stronger sense of self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. So yeah, calling, I don't know, because I haven't really connected it like in that spiritual sense, because I mean, some of the stuff we do is not uplifting in a spiritual way, so I it's very difficult to like say it's my calling, but then I'm playing a serial killer in a movie.
I'm going to come back on that because what you've just said is very important for the latter part when you're talking about healing. Let's unpack your life a bit. You openly talk about the abuse that you went through during your school days, right through to your last relationship, I'd like to think, where you were being domestically violated. Do you mind taking us through that journey, that whole abuse journey?
So in primary school, I was like this very shy kid, like I alluded to earlier on. And when I got to high school, my parents decided to take me to a boarding school. And I went to a very prestigious school. It was an opportunity to explore, to grow, and to figure out like self, essentially. But because I was this shy little kid and I went to a traditional boys' school, there were a lot of things that didn't go as planned and as one would have hoped. So bullying was definitely like one of the things, and like because it's the type of school that it is, like some of the bullying is disguised as initiation or this is tradition that we do here all the time. But what it does to self is way more damaging than what it does to us as a community within the school space. So yeah, like the bullying that was there just continued to make me have less self-confidence, less self-worth, up until the point where I got into a senior position and I retaliated by bullying the juniors because it felt like, well, this is how the system works. And if I want to survive, I need to follow the system, which is a very skewed way of thinking, but that's kind of the mentality you get into. And once you step out of school and you look back, you realize like, the way in which I just spent my last 5 years from grade 8 up until matric is actually very traumatic because you experienced bullying and then you bullied. And that is just like not a good framework to then step into the real world, quote unquote, which is then varsity. And this is where this relationship began.
For parents with boy children in school, what are some of the examples of the initiation, if you're able to talk about it, and the types of bullying, and what kind of red flags did you raise with your parents?
So I didn't raise anything with my parents because I lived in Polokwane, which is in Limpopo. And when I came to Johannesburg to go to school was at St. Stephen's. And my parents were still in Polokwane. So I was literally like, technically I'm alone where I'm at, you know, even though it's like a 2.5 hour drive and my sister lived like 30 minutes away from school, but it just felt like I've been put here to grow into this strong young man, you know, with the different qualities that the school poses that, you know, your kids will be kind of taught to become these men of stature, these men of courage and bravery and all of these amazing qualities when it comes to masculinity. So going through my first, I wouldn't even say first term, my first month, there was a school psychologist, and I went to the school psychologist and I was like, yo, I'm being bullied. So-and-so is doing this to me. And so-and-so says I must wake up in the morning at 5:30 to go sit on the toilet so that I can warm it up for him so that when he gets there, the toilet is warm. So-and-so says I must come and wipe his bum when he's done taking a poop. Like, this is all under the scope of initiation, but it's like, it's really ridiculous if you think about it. It's almost like we're in prison. And by the end of that school day, when I had met with the psychologist, everyone that I had mentioned was aware that I had spoken about them. So patient-doctor confidentiality was completely out the window. And obviously snitches get stitches. It made my experience even more difficult because now I was known as a snitch. So then that's when I realized that, okay, in order to fit into this world, you keep quiet, you take your strides, and you'll get to the other side eventually, which is why when I was in senior position, I retaliated because it was like, I've been waiting for 3 years for this moment, and I'm going to make sure that I utilize it the way that I've been brought up to utilize it within this space. So some of this stuff is like some of the examples I just gave now, or being told to make 2-minute noodles in exactly 2 minutes. It's highly impossible. The kettle itself takes longer than 2 minutes just to boil, you know, and you get whacked with a cricket bat because you didn't make 2-minute noodles in 2 minutes. It's like, it's scientifically impossible to make 2-minute noodles in 2 minutes. Unless, I don't know, maybe there's a way, you know, maybe there is a way, I don't know. But yeah, so it's some stuff is like that. The list goes on. I mean, we've seen it from news articles from other schools, certain types of initiation, things that they go through. So it's no different to that. It's just not everyone is built for those experiences. For some guys, they'll experience it and they'll say things like, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be who I am today. And yes, technically it's the same for me, but what that experience did to me at that time was not something that I glorified. You know, it was something that I was afraid of. you go to bed with one eye open because you don't know if someone's going to come with a pillowcase filled with school shoes and start whacking you whilst you're sleeping. Like, it's all of these things where you are constantly living under stress. And we all know that if your body is constantly under stress, that is not healthy, and all of the different types of things that can happen to you, and based on the chemical releases and hormones and stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't a nice experience. And then coming into my relationship, it was a very, like any other relationship, beautiful relationship. Started off well, and puppy love was there and all that beautiful stuff. Just based on spending more time with each other, you then start to really open up and you start to be more transparent. And within that, you start to find out certain things about each other that are maybe not necessarily what you thought about one another, so expectations now lead to disappointment, and then you have a certain way that you'd like to live life. So now when we're cohabitating and living in the same space, there's certain things that we do differently just because of cultural differences. I'm from South Africa, she was from Slovenia, and like that's a huge cultural difference. I think she was 6 years or 7 years older than me. That already also played an influence. So there was just like a lot of things that just didn't add up as more time went on. But I was so young compared to her. I wasn't even 21. Hey, Hungani. So
like, you were legal though.
Yeah, of course. but even that, like being put in a position where it's like, if we're not going to have sex, then we're not going to be in a relationship together. And as a young man, young boy, you're like, but I want to be in a relationship with you, but now there's this condition, and now you are saving yourself for marriage, but because this individual is now putting this like ultimatum, then now you fall into that. And it's like, there's so many different things that eventually led to it becoming physical. And it started with small things, but it's only after leaving the relationship where you realize that first it started with like psychological abuse, and just almost everything that you do gets turned into no, don't do it like that, do it like this, or no, you shouldn't go there because you don't need to be there, let's rather do this, and like at the time you think this person wants the best for you, but actually they are reducing you from the very community that you have. You are no longer hanging out with your friends. Everything that you do, they are with you. And it's like eventually you end up even asking for permission from them, like, can I go to the shops? And it's just like, you don't even realize. So by the time I got physical, I felt like I deserve what I'm getting, because I felt like there must be something wrong that I've done. Otherwise, then this wouldn't be happening, So that's essentially like the trajectory of my abuse from high school up until that point. And I think because I never really had a moment to deal with what happened in high school, some of the traits and ways in which I survived high school was what I was trying to use to survive within the relationship. Definitely help is needed.
It feels like actually we're being groomed. I think we see that a lot with sexual predators. They groom their victim to a point where when they're ready to strike. It seems as though your relationship, it started off with the whole grooming phase, where you're being prepared, you're being isolated, you were being controlled until a point where you were completely submissive. How far did the abuse go in terms of physical? How far? What was that like?
Oh, that was hectic. Look, and I'll chip in and say, like, I don't necessarily think that she had premeditatedly groomed me. She had her own traumas that eventually came out of the closet, which then was like, it made sense. Like, it's not to justify her actions, but it's like, I understand why she made certain decisions or understood things in a certain way because of the traumas that she hadn't dealt with, the very same way I had the traumas that I hadn't dealt with. When it comes to the physicalness of it, it was pretty rife. I had scars like from battle bruises, basically. I was very self-conscious about my neck area and my face because a lot of the times like she would either like strangle me, so then her nails would kind of like go into my neck. So I had like a lot of scarring on my neck. I had quite a lot of scarring on my cheeks from either like when being slapped and you turn your head too soon, so then her nail is then the one that like cuts you open. And I'd go to school looking like that and people wouldn't even say anything. It's bizarre. I used a lot of bio oil, a lot of tissue oil, snail oil, any oil you can think of to try and get rid of the scars, chemical peels on my face and all of that kind of stuff, facial treatments. And the bulk of it has worked, but also I'm in an industry where I wear makeup a lot, so that also helps. So yeah, no, it was very, very evident that something was not okay, but still getting help or having people reach out was still like non-existent, you know? So yeah, like the one time I went to school, in fact, we were walking to school together and then we walked past this residential area and there was a family that came home. So I was in the US and in an area called Burbank, which is in LA. They have, you know, like in the movies where they just drive in from the road into their house. There's no like fencing or gates or anything like that. Yeah, so it was that type of setup and we're walking on the sidewalk. And this family, husband and wife and their little girl arrived home, opened up I think it was a Land Rover or some form of Jeep car looking like that, opened up the boot and they had groceries. So they were making like a couple of trips in and out to get their groceries. And we are having a heated argument right on the sidewalk, being walloped, I'm being pulled, my shirt's being ripped. And this family is just going on about their day, grabbing their groceries, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, until they finished, got into their house, closed the door, and no, not even a shout from across the street like, hey, can you guys stop it? Or can you guys go somewhere else? Or what's going on? Nothing. And that for me was like the moment when I realized that, oh snap, all right, cool, like you're on your own, dude. Like if you don't do anything for yourself,
no one is coming to your rescue.
No one's gonna come and help you. And at the time, there was also a social media experiment that was happening in the US where these actors would go out into public areas and portray a couple, male and female, where the male would be actively abusive towards the woman to see how people would react. And then you'd have all of these guys and women coming and say, hey, stop it. And they would stop it. But when it was the girl now doing what the guy was doing, people would just be looking from the outside, well, not the outside, like from far away and probably pointing. Some would be laughing and they would interview. No one would help. And they would interview some of them and say, why didn't you go and do anything? And they'd say things like, oh, because he probably cheated. That's why she was doing that. Or he probably did this. And you're just like, wow, really?
So it sounds justifiable for a man to be abused by a woman than the other way. I just want to move quickly to point out that we actually got some statistics from Matrix Men in our last article around rape and sexual abuse, where we were focusing on children. And from those stats, we discovered that around 250,000 young boys are sexually abused every year. And out of the 250,000, there's 11% that actually go on to abuse other children. So this is a cycle and there's a link between the two. And it's quite interesting that you also held space for your ex, for this lady, that where you actually understood that she also has her traumas. And I think it's something that we all kind of need to recognize, that we're not fighting a battle against one another, but we're fighting a battle that we are all in. We are all struggling with trauma. And it was really good that you recognized that and you saw that play out. And at what point did you decide to leave, and what made you leave, and how did you leave?
So recognizing the trauma part is just so that one can realize that it's really not about you, like that person has things that they need to deal with. And it just so happened that I was in her life at that time. If it was somebody else, it would have probably been that individual. Leaving was not by choice. And I laugh because I often think about it, or I guess I often used to think about it, like what would have happened had this not happened. And by that, I mean, we separated because both our permits to stay in the United States expired. So she had to go back home and I needed to come back home. And even in so doing, our separation wasn't like, all right, well, never going to see you again. It's been great. The couple of years that we spent together, the abuse, it's been fantastic. Thanks for your time. It was more like, hey, you're going back home. I'm going back home. But we're still in a relationship. We'll do this long distance thing. I'm going to get back home and work as hard as I can in order to get my O1 visa, which is the visa that you need to be able to work that side. And she's going to do the same. And then we'll reconnect, hopefully in like a year or two. But maybe in that space, I can visit where she is and she can visit where I am. So we had planned to continue being in a relationship, even though our permits expired and we had to travel back to our home countries. It's only when I landed in South Africa on the 3rd of August 2015, she texted me and said, "It's been great. Thank you for your time. All the best with your life." That was literally the text. And I was like, good riddance. Thank you. Because I never had the courage to actually break up with her as much as I wanted to for months. I just never had the courage to do it. So that's essentially how it happened. So when I said just slightly earlier, like what would have happened if this didn't happen? What would have happened if our permits never expired? What if we had green cards and we could live in the States indefinitely? What would have happened then? Would we still be together? Would we have gotten help? We tried to get help, it didn't work out. Would we have separated eventually? So that's what I meant when I was like, I would often think about that, because if it wasn't for the expiring of our permits, we wouldn't have separated. Well, at least not at that time.
Do you think that is the major challenge? You work with matrix men and you have an influx, or men that come through your doors that experience the same thing. Is this the main reason why men choose not to leave the relationship, or victims choose not to leave the relationship? What are the dynamics behind it?
I think, obviously it may be different for individual to individual, but I think it's just like you not feeling like this is something that you shouldn't be experiencing. Mm-hmm. Justifying your experience, having that idea that it will get better because it once was not like this. This is not the person that I fell in love with, and I know that we'll get there one day. We just need to work on this. Or I just need to stop doing this and she'll stop doing that. So it's like leaving, you think of leaving, but then you ask yourself like, but am I leaving because the relationship is toxic, or because our experience is toxic? And it's like, no, it's our experience, not the relationship. We have days where it's so nice, sunshine and roses. So we just need to focus on having more of those days and less of the other days. Like you find, because again, you have your own traumas that you haven't dealt with, whether it's abandonment, whether it's like there's so many different things. So now for example, I would think, okay, if I'm not with her, then who am I with? No, I don't want to be alone. And then we stay, so it's stuff like that. And you just find ways to, especially if you don't have the courage to do it, because also it's like, if I bring up us leaving or breaking up, will that insinuate a fight? And then now it's another thing. Because there was a moment where I threatened to leave, and she locked us both into the room and threw the key outside the window. And now it's like, Now we're in a fight. No one can leave because the door's been locked, the key's out the window. So like, yeah, so there's like many different variables, but I think what are your traumas as an individual that you've experienced that are going to play into that? So if you have abandonment issues, if you have mommy issues, daddy issues, whatever your case is, or if you've always been in a toxic relationship, this is something that you feel you deserve. It's your norm. You're so used to it. You're not going to leave. If you're afraid to leave because you think it's going to yield into another situation, then you're not going to leave, you know? So it's just having the courage to actually do it because you have the means to do it is what plays a huge role, because we lived together. So if we break up, what's happening? Who's leaving the apartment? And now I must go find an apartment by myself, which is more expensive. Hence, we started living together. But I still need to give 30-day notice. So then do I only break up at the end of, you know, it's like,
too complicated.
It's tricky.
So from what you're telling me, this is your experience. There's a lot of resemblance with what women actually go through with abusers. The very same struggles on when to leave, why should I leave? Is it that bad? Is it toxic? And the trauma, it sounds very similar to what women are also going through, which is very interesting. Now that you got out of the relationship and you just said, peace, I'm done with you. At what point did you recognize that this was domestic violence? How did you come out of it? I mean, what help did you seek? How did you get help?
So what helped me was talking about it. Because I think the thought of, no, I'm probably like the only guy that's experienced this.
But did you recognize it as domestic violence? Did you recognize it?
Right from the beginning. Okay. Like it was very evident. What I didn't recognize was the emotional and psychological abuse prior to the physical abuse. But talking about it is what helped me, because it felt like I wasn't hiding anymore, you know, because now I would like meet up with my parents or my family when I would visit back home, and I've got these scars on my face and I'm wearing a scarf in the middle of summer, and it's just like, what is going on with you? Like, yes, you live in the US, but it's hot here. Like, what's going on? You know, but it's just because I was trying to cover up. And eventually I had to start sharing about why I have these marks. And like, the more I spoke about it, the more I didn't feel shame or guilt or embarrassment. And the more I started to speak to more guys about it, like, if this is something that's happening to you, share it with me, because I've been through this, so that I could start to create a little bit of a community for myself and for my brothers, in a sense. And then meeting Martin from Matrix Men was also a great help, because then we started to speak about our experiences, his experiences, my experiences. And it was just like, for anyone who's never heard Martin's experience, I'd encourage them to check out the magazine. I don't know if we can put a link for them to check out.
Yes, I will definitely put a link. Yes.
Because getting his experience, I felt like, oh, my experience is like so tiny compared to what he experienced. But we share similar thoughts and similar pain, even though our experiences are different. And then finding out that there's a whole other host of other guys that have experienced a multitude of different things, and getting into spaces with those guys. And it's just like, oh, so you're not alone, you know, there's other people who share an experience and have also managed to still make a life for themselves. Was very encouraging. And that's essentially how I managed to just move on, if you want to call it. I never really received like therapy or counseling or psychology sessions or anything like that for my experience, but rather I just managed to just talk about it. And once I became a popular figure within the entertainment industry, I continued to talk about it, which at first like was very like scary because it was like, yo, now I'm a public figure and like, what are people going to think? And I literally had to have a moment where it was like, well, how many other public figure men have gone through this experience and are keeping quiet because of this very thing? So then
Yes.
that pushed me to speak. So yeah, that's essentially how I managed to move on. You know, I mean, there's good days and there's bad days. There's some days you just wake up feeling sad, you don't even know why, you know, and you kind of need to just live through those feelings. But most of the time, like, all is well. And what I made sure was that whoever I interact with is aware of my experiences so that they don't do things that trigger me. Or if something does trigger me, they understand why I've been triggered. So even like with my wife, when we started dating, she used to love to like play wrestle. And I was like, yo, I don't like this because it triggers me. Like every single time you like get ready to do whatever wrestling thing, like I feel like I'm being attacked, even though we're playing, you know. And then we had to find a different way to play together, which is essentially being able to share with others so that they can understand where you come from, so that you don't find yourself being triggered and then something bad happens that you will forever regret for the rest of your life, you know. So yeah.
So from your experience, I mean, I trauma comes in different levels and in different shapes and forms. Starting your healing process started by just talking about it, recognizing and talking about it. It took away the stigma, it took away the shame, it lessened the burden in terms of when it came to trauma. What is your life like now? Because a lot of men, the reason I raise this is because, like I'm saying, there are different levels of trauma. Beyond just talking about it, are there any other alternative healing modalities that are available for men through Matrix Men, for example? If a man has gone through the abuse and they've gone through, but it's way deeper than yours, it's probably more shameful, maybe other things that happen, and talking about it is just not enough. Are there any other healing modalities that, for example, Matrix Men offers?
Yes, of course. You can get into peer support groups, which is a really good one, because you get into a space where you have other men who have had similar experiences. You know, even if you don't speak or share in that group setting, but because Tamba, Jack, Tom, and Sam have shared about their experiences in that session, you'll find that you identify with 3 of those experiences out of the 4. And it's like, oh man, that sounded like you was talking about my experience. Like that was literally what I went through, you know. And then you come back for another session and there's new faces, and then they speak, and then you're like, that's what I went through. And then eventually maybe you'll speak. Which is why speaking is so important, because when you speak, you lessen the way you think about your experience, in the shameful sense, in the guilty sense, in the embarrassment sense. And you start to relate to the guys within your peer support group. There's also private one-on-one counseling that you can have, you know, depending on how comfortable you are. Most of the time at Matrix, you'll start with a one-on-one session and then you're placed into a peer support group, just so that we're able to kind of gauge where you're at, you know. And the one-on-one sessions are great as well, because it gives you an opportunity to just vent, air out your thoughts, talk about where you are. If you don't want to talk, we can ask you probing questions that can lead to you opening up about certain things. Sometimes you don't even realize the depth of your trauma, and then through probing questions you end up having these aha moments, and you're like, oh my gosh, it actually started when I was 4 years old, or it was when I visited so and so in 2006, and now these memories are coming up. And in those type of instances, you want to be in a very safe space, because you technically are reliving those traumas as they reappear into your mind, you know. Your body can't differentiate from something that's happening right now and something that's happened already, especially when the memory and the feeling of it comes up. So you have to be in a space that can take care of you, and that's essentially it. But the very 2 examples I've given all are about talking. Talking is so important. It is like the most important thing when it comes to your traumas. You'll go to a therapist, you'll go to a psychologist. What do you do there? You talk.
Yes,
talking is the most important part of healing, because you can't heal and get onto this journey of healing without talking.
Absolutely. So whilst we're at it, what is Matrix Men about?
Matrix Men in a nutshell is about supporting male victims of abuse and also supporting men's mental health, and in so doing, rebuilding the family structure. So we're not trying to take away the man from his wife and his kids because he's been abusive to them. We want to help him so that he can reconcile with his family. Because why? The family dynamic is such a broken dynamic in our society. I mean, we have 62% households that have fatherlessness, and we know what that does to children. We know what that does to our society. So we're not trying to take away the father. We're trying to, let's rehabilitate the father. Let's have the father deal with whatever traumas, whatever addictions, whatever issues that he's had, so that he can then reconcile with his family. We have a beautiful example of a man who was very abusive, and his wife actually got us in touch with him. And through, I think he came for like 3 or 2 sessions, and he was equipped with how to deal with moments of anger. He was very quick to anger, and just through those few sessions he was able to deal with angering moments in a better way. And every single time he would have these moments, he would always see his family backing away. Either his children would run away to their bedroom or whatever the case is. And it was only once he had come to our sessions that he was able to identify that, because something happened and the kids knew that he was going to be angry and he was going to start being violent. So they started to back away. But because he was now equipped with a breathing mechanism and a counting mechanism, now he was able to see that, oh, so my kids always run away because they think that I'm about to do this, which then further made him break down inside, because he didn't want his kids to be afraid of him. So it's in so doing that now that family has now reconciled, and the father is within the household with his wife, with his children, and now they're able to deal with things better.
Beautiful story. We will send more information around Matrix Men. So just quickly in closing, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now that you're healed, what does life look like? For those that are still in the dark, is there hope actually at the end of the tunnel? Did you make it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a continuous journey. You never go from point A to point B when it comes to healing from your traumas and from whatever your experience is. You are continuously on that journey, but there's definitely light, not even at the end of the tunnel, within the tunnel. And right now, my life is something I would have never anticipated, something I would have never expected. And I'm very grateful to be in the position that I'm at. I mean, I'm married, I've got a beautiful daughter, my career is going well, my wife's career is going well, we have a home, our families are doing great, we're able to help other people, and it's just, we're able to support each other in a beautiful way. Is there conflict? Yes, conflict will always arise. We're 2 different people who were brought up differently. So there'll always be moments of conflict, but we're able to resolve those moments, and we're able to, within those moments, still choose to love one another, and that, I think, is the beauty of it, being able to identify that even when things are not okay, I still love you, and not that the love has now disappeared and it's all about just wanting to inflict pain or wanting to inflict some form of hurtfulness to the other individual. So I'm in a very beautiful space in my life right now, and I am so grateful to everyone that is a part of this journey.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal story. This has been insightful. We do wish you all the best, and I hope that a lot of men will start following you and can reach out to Matrix Men for help, because God knows we do need this. We do need this as a nation. Thank you again for joining us at Collective Action Magazine.
Thank you so much, Hazel.
Hopefully
yes, definitely.